Let's talk to Sahar Aziz, the distinguished professor at Rutgers University Law School and director of the Center for Security, Race and Rights. Professor, welcome. Good to see you. President Trump's supporters might well say that this is simply the enforcement of the rule of law against undocumented migrants. That's fair, isn't it?
Well, the enforcement of the rule of law does not entail violating the Posse Comitatus, I'm mispronouncing it, but essentially the law that prohibits federal troops from operating within the United States. That's why we have local police and we have state police. And we have even the National Guard, which is most frequently and almost exclusively, with few exceptions, deployed by the state governor. So there is ways to enforce immigration laws without needing to use federal troops. I also think Trump is clearly being quite disingenuous and highly authoritarian in his practice of using or abusing his federal powers in control as commander-in-chief, using the military in order to politically target his political opposition. In this case, the governor, Gavin Newsom, who is a Democrat, and California is also the state where his opponent, Kamala Harris, in the 2023 elections she's from California. So it's not a coincidence that he's targeting California and that he's trying to portray what are otherwise mass protests as riots and looters, when in fact that even the governor and local police aren't portraying it that way.
But sending in the National Guard might well work. It might send what President Trump's supporters might describe as the right message. It might send a signal around the world.
It also sends a very dangerous precedent, which is to have it be a habit, to have it be a norm to use federal troops, right? The National Guard are federal troops to deal with domestic issues. And there are very clear lines between federal troops and domestic law enforcement. That's why we have police and we have state police. And that is a fundamental American norm that policing is under state governance. If a Democratic president had tried to do the same thing against a Republican governor in the South or in the Midwest in a red state, the conservatives and the Republicans would be up in arms and say this is completely against our American legal and normative red line, where troops do not operate, federal troops do not operate domestically, except in most extreme circumstances, like a national, a national emergency such as a hurricane or a natural disaster or the COVID pandemic. And again, it is with the permission and request of the governor.
America, of course, a nation of immigrants. How does this particular chapter fit into that history?
Well, America has a very complicated relationship with immigrants. It loves them and it hates them at the same time. This is a part of its history of xenophobia and of wanting immigrants, but then using them as scapegoats, whether it was the Chinese, the Japanese, Eastern European Jews, Irish Catholics, now Arab, Middle Eastern Muslims and Palestinians, and Latinos. So it is unfortunately consistent in terms of having that love-hate relationship with immigrants, especially in a country that can't survive without immigrants economically, cannot thrive without immigrants economically. But what we're seeing in this moment in time is a very racist xenophobia targeting two primary groups, Central Americans and Middle Easterners, especially Palestinians. And that is today's chapter in this xenophobia. If you go to the World War II era, it was the Japanese, and to some extent the Italians. Before that, it was the Eastern European Jews who were categorically raced as communists, and also the Chinese exclusion laws that portray Chinese immigrants as a threat to national security. So this is not new, unfortunately, and this all the more reason why Americans need to reject, regardless of their political beliefs, they need to reject a president using federal troops to do the work that local law enforcement should be doing. It's not immigration enforcement. It's essentially policing the streets when there are mass protests that are protected by the First Amendment.
Professor, good to see you. Thank you for coming on the programme. Sahar Aziz, the distinguished professor of Rutgers University Law School and director of the Center for Security, Race and Rights.